Today I'm at Dilston Physic Garden in the Tyne Valley. I'm actually here to do some work for the garden. I have a list of flowers that I need to go and find and shoot, which will put my flower identification skills to the test. But I'm also shooting this video, which you're watching right now. And I'm going to talk about flash. I have a fairly standard flash gun here, as well as a ring flash. I'm going to show you how to use them creatively when shooting macro and close-up subjects and get effects that you can't get when shooting with ambient light only. So as usual, I'm going to find my first spot and we'll begin. Let's talk about the ring flash first. Now this is nearly 27 years old. Mrs. T bought it for me when we got engaged, and I like to joke that she got a flash ring and I got a ring flash. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, because it's such an old unit, it's a very basic thing. It does have an automatic mode, but that's not ideal. I don't particularly like it, so I tend to use it in manual only. So I have to set the exposure on the camera in order to adjust the flash exposure, which is done by adjusting either the ISO or the aperture or both in combination. The shutter speed has no effect on the flash exposure, and I'm going to be going into that in a bit more detail later. But otherwise, it's quite a small unit as well. It only fits on very small lenses. The aperture isn't that large, as you can see. However, the 60mm lens for the Olympus cameras and Micro Four Thirds in general is ideal, because that's a really small lens anyway, so it fits on quite neatly via an adapter. This ring flash was made in the 20th century, but it's not useless just because it was made then, which is what I keep telling myself. However, these days you're more likely to get ring flash or ring lights powered by LED, and they tend to be more adjustable. With this unit, the entire ring fires. With LED lighting, quite often you can fire all of it, or one side or the other, which gives you more scope for modelling, sort of casting a shadow on one side and lighting the other. However, this does produce a very nice soft light, and because the light is between the lens and the subject, there's no risk of getting a shadow, which can happen when you've got flash mounted to the Hotshoe. Sometimes the lens itself can cast a shadow. This, however, is shadowless light, which is ideal for close-up and macro. One benefit of using flash when shooting close-up and macro subjects is that you can use a fairly small aperture to increase depth of field to get everything nice and sharp without compromising on either the shutter speed or the ISO. Today the lighting is quite soft, it's slightly overcast, so if I was to shoot with ambient light only, I might need to increase ISO to 800 say, in order to get a fast enough shutter speed to freeze any movement or to avoid camera shake. With flash I can use a fairly fast shutter speed to freeze movement, and of course the flash itself, because it's a very instant burst of light, will freeze movement too. When I shoot with flash, I always use a manual exposure, because I want to control both the shutter speed and the aperture. Like I say, aperture controls depth of field obviously, but also the flash exposure. So I can throttle back the flash by closing down the aperture, or I can increase the flash exposure by opening up the aperture. And I can also control flash exposure with ISO as well. Shutter speed, on the other hand, has no effect on flash exposure. It controls the ambient. So if I wanted to get a nice bright background, I'd use a slow shutter speed. If I wanted to really sort of emphasize the subject and darken down the background, I'd increase the shutter speed. Now obviously there is a limit, which is the flash sync speed, which on this camera is 1/250th. But on a day like today, that's still going to give me a nice sort of dark background if I really wanted to sort of emphasize the subject and really sort of throw the background into an almost black Stygian darkness. This is my first shot setup. It's a very simple shot of a flower head, and I've made sure that there's nothing much between the flower head and the background, because what I don't want is anything relatively close to the camera being affected by the flash exposure. As it is, the background, it must be, I don't know, 2 meters away, which is ideal. Now, unfortunately, it is quite bright now. The sun's just come out, and typically when I want sunshine, I don't get it. When I want cloud, I don't get that either. So I'm sort of battling against really bright ambient light because I want the background to be as dark as possible. At the moment, I've got the shutter speed set to 1/25th of a second and the aperture to f14. So the aperture is controlling the flash exposure, like I say, and I've just tested it and that's fine. But I want to dial in a faster shutter speed to make the background darker. So I'll do that now. And again, I'm doing this on the Olympus app. So if I dial in to 1/250th, which is the flash sync speed, and I can't get any faster than this without creating sort of flash sync problems. So that's my limit. And as you can see from the image, everything's now dark, the flower and the background. But when I press not the camera, the app, when I fire the shot, you can see the flowers are nicely illuminated. So I'm going to experiment now. I'll try different apertures, different ISOs, and I'll see if I can get the background a wee bit darker. And if it works, I'll put it on screen after this. Because it's so bright now, I just can't get the background dark enough. This isn't a particularly high-powered flash. I'll use the other one later, which has got more oomph. And it's so bright now, and again, typically the sun's come out when I least want it, which is the story of my life, but never mind. I might have to cheat a little bit, and you'll have seen the image by now. I might have to do a subject selection and then darken the background in post-processing, but we'll see. Anyway, I'm going to find another subject, and I might even switch to the other flash next. Before I do another shot though, I should really explain the setup here. The flash is connected to the camera via a sync cord, and that's attached to the Hotshoe via this adapter, which you'll notice is a Nikon adapter. However, it only has a single firing pin, so it is safe to use on this camera. It doesn't have any proprietary contacts that may cause a short circuit. Now the OM1 does actually have a sync port on the front here. However, I tend not to use it. I'm always nervous that I might lose the cap. So I just use this, and like I say, it can be used with any camera, so I can jump from camera to camera if need be. And this just lives with the sync cord and the flash. And I think it looks quite funky. I think it looks, yeah, I do like this. Even though it does sometimes get caught on branches and the like, and comes out when you least expect it. This is another shot setup, and even though it's a bit brighter, the sun keeps coming out, it would still be tricky to get a sharp shot of this flower because it's moving around and occasionally bees fly into it too. There's a bit of a breeze still, and to get a fast enough shutter speed and to get a small enough aperture to get enough depth of field, again would mean some compromise in terms of ISO. So I'm going to use the flash this time to freeze the movement and allow me to get a fast enough shutter speed. And hopefully, if I time it right, I'll also get a bee in the shot as well. We'll see. So to get the shot, again, I'm shooting in manual exposure. I'm using a fast shutter speed, 1/200th, as well as a very small aperture, because this time I'm really close to the subject. I'm much closer than I was for the previous shot. So I use a much smaller aperture, so f16 in this case. And again, I'm throttling the flash exposure using the ISO this time, because I want the depth of field as is. I'm happy with the ambient background. That can be whatever that ends up. So I'm using the ISO to throttle the flash exposure, increasing it if I want the flash exposure to be brighter, decreasing it to lower it. So all I've got to do now is just wait for my bee, and there are quite a few of them flying in and out of it, so I don't think I'm going to have to wait long. Right, time for the big boy now. This is a Yongnuo flash. It's manual too, just like the Cobra ring flash. However, at least this one was made this century. And when I'm shooting macro and close-up, I tend to use soft boxes like this here, Elastilite. And again, that softens the light, so it diffuses the light through this white panel here, which is a much less harsh light than you get from the flash alone. But I do use it in a very similar way to the ring light. Again, I'd use it in manual exposure, using the aperture to control the amount of power. However, this time, unlike the ring flash, I can actually throttle the power on the flash too. So I've got two ways to control, or three ways, if you include ISO. I have three ways to adjust the flash exposure. So it's much more flexible in that regard. And again, just like the ring flash, shutter speed has no effect at all on flash exposure. So I can use that to adjust the ambient lighting as need be to make it either darker by increasing the shutter speed or lighter by lowering it. I do like this plant. It's very sculptural and I like it against the sky, which is quite an interesting sky. However, there's a bit of a mismatch in terms of the exposure. The sky is so much brighter than the plant. So if I exposed for the sky, the plant's silhouetted. If I expose for the plant, the sky burns out. And this is where flash is really useful, because I can balance the exposure between the two by popping enough light into the subject to get it nicely lit, but set the exposure of the shutter speed to get the sky nicely exposed. So I'm going to take a first shot, see what that looks like, and then see whether it can be refined further. Yeah, take the shot. Yeah, I don't think that quite worked. Everything's well exposed, the plant is well exposed, the sky was nicely exposed. However, it's a frontal light, and that means any shadow is behind the subject, which makes everything look a bit flat. So I think I need to take the flash off camera. Now this isn't a wireless flash, I don't have a wireless trigger for it, so it needs to be triggered by either a cord or another flash. In this case, I'm going to use my ring flash attached to the camera, but not to illuminate the subject, but to trigger this flash, which I'll use off camera to the side of the subject, and see if that's a better lighting. So I'll get set up and then we'll take a look and see what that looks like. So I've got everything set up. I have the ring flash attached to the camera, but it's not going to illuminate the subject, like I say. It's just going to fire and then trigger this flash using the sensor on the front of the flash. So I need to make sure that that is pointing towards the flash that fires from here. And what I want to do is that I want to have the flashlight coming from the same direction as the ambient light. So the sun is over there somewhere. So I want the flash to be coming from that angle to give me a more naturalistic effect. So I just need to kind of hold it over there. And again, like I say, try and get the sensor angled towards the flash here. So I'll take a few shots. If that works, I'll pop it on screen after this. I've just spotted these teasels, which I think might make a better subject than the previous one. Again, they're very sculptural and they look great against the dark sky, and there is sort of cloud rolling through, which is looking a bit stormier, which is great. So again, I'm still doing the same thing, pointing the flash from the same direction as the sun, and then throttling the flash with the power buttons on the back of the flash here. At the moment I'm using it 1:1, so I can get quite close into the teasel, and hopefully I'm going to overpower the ambient lighting with that. So I'll take that shot and we'll see what that looks like. Well, that was fun, but I really should get on now and do the work that I'm here to do. I have a big list, and it's not going to get done if I just sort of stand here and talk to you. But I hope you found this video useful. I don't use flash every time I do macro or close-up. In many ways I much prefer ambient lighting, But when conditions are against you, when it's too dim and dark to get a good shot, or you need to freeze movement, flash is a really good addition to your arsenal. So it's well worth having an experiment, so I'd highly recommend that. Do let me know if you have any comments about anything I've covered in today's video, and do let me know how you shoot with flash or LED lighting for that matter. I'm always willing to learn. I mean, that's part of why I'm doing these videos, to tell you what I do, but also to find out what you do. Photography is such a huge subject. There's so much to learn, and I'm more than willing to learn all I can about it. In the meantime though, hope you have a very pleasant week, and I'll see you in 7 days' time.